and the leaders of National Security Working Group and Caucus connected to the House Democrats. We had a very active discussion today on a variety of issues that will be before Congress this week. House Democrats continue to work to make life better for everyday Americans, to lower costs, to deal with the inflationary pressures that the American people are experiencing, and at the same time grapple with the challenges that we confront as a result of the Supreme Court's devastating decision to end Roe v. Wade and take away a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. And of course, while we've taken a substantial first step in dealing with the gun violence epidemic that we confront here in America, we know that more needs to be done, and we continue to work to address this challenge, and there will be legislation on the floor this week with respect to ensuring our local law enforcement has the tools necessary when they confront an active shooter situation, which occurs far too often here in the greatest country in the world. We also will have the NDAA on the floor this week, which is incredibly important given what we see happening throughout the world. And I'll defer any comments on the importance of moving our National Defense Authorization Act to our three co-chairs, other than to say President Biden has demonstrated extraordinary leadership in the face of tremendous pressure that the world is confronting, particularly in the Ukraine, with Vladimir Putin's tragic invasion of that democratic country. All the more reason why ensuring that we have a robust infrastructure for our national security apparatus is critical. And I yield to our co-chair, Vice Chair, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to hearing from our colleagues as well, the National Security Task Force.
I appreciate their work. As the chairman mentioned, we talked about protecting a woman's right to choose in caucus. Also appreciate our colleague, Congressman Brad Schneider, sharing his experience as a representative for Highland Park, what he went through on that day, and some of the stories that he heard from constituents on these weapons of war that were used in that mass shooting. But Democrats are also focused on protecting our democracy. Yesterday's January 6th hearing discussed another topic, the link of extremism to the activities that happened on January 6th. And the fact that the extremist and the former president both had the same goal, which was to stop a peaceful transfer of power. And that rhetoric meant something, and that the president had the meeting on December 18th, he tweeted on December 19th, and that became, in part, a call to arms for those who sought to come to the Capitol. And then we heard directly from someone who joined in that effort. I was particularly taken by Mr. Ayers' comments as someone who participated in the rally and then took the president's charge and wish to come march on the Capitol. How it has changed his life was particularly moving. But this is exactly what Republicans wanted when Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy chose not to move forward with an independent commission that all of my colleagues behind me sought. That's what happened. They chose not to hear these voices. They chose not to find out the truth, not to seek to find out what happened on January 6th and that threat to democracy that we all experienced. And so it's important that we continue to tell this story. We've said that from the beginning, that we're going to find the facts, we're going to chase the truth, we're going to tell this story in a robust and thorough way. And despite Republican efforts of distorting these facts, we're going to share that with the American public. We appreciate the next steps. We're going to have one more hearing next week, talking specifically about the time period, the 187 minutes within the White House, what the president was doing, and how he could have played a role in preventing more violence if he had merely gone to the briefing room and asked people to leave the Capitol. As someone who is no stranger to protecting our country, but also protecting our democracy. As a former impeachment manager, I'm going to turn it over now to Jason Crow.
Thank you, Chairman Jeffries, Vice Chair Aguilar, and my colleagues Andy Kim and Mikey Sherrill for joining with me today. My public service career started as a private in the Army. That was the beginning of my service to this country. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about what it felt like to be Private Crow, be on the very receiving end of the policies that are made in Washington, D.C. What it feels like, what it's like to have to implement those policies and those decisions, what it's like to not have equipment or support when you need it. So years later, sitting here helping make those policies, it guides those decisions, it guides my thought process. Bottom line is that the Democratic Party and the House Democratic Caucus is the party of national security in the 21st century. We are the party that's dedicated to rule of law, to affirming our connection with our allies, to addressing the largest national security threat facing our planet and our country, that is climate change, which is both a threat multiplier and a threat magnifier, and dedicated to doing this in the right way. So when we passed the National Defense Authorization Act this week, we have a couple of really important goals. One is we have to keep faith with our servicemen and women, those men and women who stand up and raise their right hand and take an oath and are willing to give their life to keep it. We have to keep faith with their families. We have to address the threats, the very real and very deep threats from our adversaries. We have to send a message to our allies around the world that America is here, that we are firm, that we will stand with them in their time of hour or their greatest hour of need. And we have to address climate change and the various threats that we face. That's what this bill does. That's what the House Democratic Caucus has done. And I'm very proud to be a part of that effort and to join with my colleagues to say we will protect this nation, we will discharge our duties, and we will do so in the right and responsible manner. So with that, I am very proud to turn this over to my dear friend, Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey.
Thanks, Jason. And thank you, Hakeem, for your leadership of the caucus. Thanks, Pete, for all of your work on the January 6th committee. It's been very important. And it's wonderful to be here today with Jason Crow and Andy Kim, who I serve with on the National Security Task Force for the caucus, but also as members of the House Armed Services Committee. I'm really excited to be here today to highlight some of our efforts and priorities in the National Defense Authorization Act. The National Defense Authorization Act, I haven't had enough coffee, is one of the most important bills Congress passes every year. It not only strengthens our national security and sets vital policies for our service members, it also invests in jobs, innovation, and modernization. In NJ11, with Picatinny Arsenal and our defense manufacturing base, the importance of this bill is clear. And it will also have an impact on the everyday lives of our service members and our veterans. My top priority in Congress is to make life more affordable for New Jersey families. Just last week, I held a roundtable in my district to discuss the impact of high prices and inflation on NJ11 residents. During that conversation, I heard from a local veteran who has struggled to find steady employment since his time in service, even after utilizing his GI benefits. This year's bill takes that problem seriously and addresses it head on. I'm proud the NDAA includes my provisions to strengthen registered apprenticeships in the Skill Bridge program and take steps to increase opportunities for women in STEM to better meet the needs of the DoD, of Picatinny Arsenal, and NJ11 employers. When it comes to bringing in and maintaining a strong uniformed workforce, we have to have sustained efforts in workforce development. One of the best ways I can make life more affordable for NJ11 families is by bringing federal tax dollars back to North Jersey, and this year's NDAA does just that. I'm very pleased to report that this bill also specifically provides robust investments in Picatinny Arsenal in my district, which not only brings well over $1 billion into the economy of New Jersey every year, but is on the cutting edge of our military's modernization efforts. These investments are a perfect example of how important this bill is. The investments it makes in Picatinny will not only make our military more effective, but will also bring more highly paid and highly skilled jobs into North Jersey. This bill also increases pay for our service members, the largest pay raise in 2 decades, to ensure we maintain our ability to recruit and train the most professional and capable military in the world. I'm proud that this year's bill takes serious steps to increase affordability, such as expanding access to childcare for our service members and their families. With our provisions in the FY 2023 NDAA, the Department of Defense will be able to prioritize climate change, a critical national security threat, as you just heard from my colleague, as officials work together to mitigate its impact and to take steps to reduce the department's emissions. For example, I'm proud to say the bill includes my provision to urge the military services to achieve full adoption of microgrids on installations. This year's bill also makes important progress to enhance America's energy independence. I was also proud to support significant reforms to reduce our reliance on foreign energy, including a provision that would direct the Department of Defense to create a strategy to eliminate any reliance on Russian-produced energy. With that, I'm looking forward to everyone's questions and the conversation we're about to have, and I will turn it over to my colleague from New Jersey, Andy Kim.
Thanks, Mikey. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming together here. One thing I just wanted to add on to what Jason and Mikey said is that, you know, the NDAA, this is a reflection of our priorities. It's a reflection of what we believe our country needs when it comes to our national security. And for me, you know, what I'll say over the last, 3.5 years that I've been here in Congress, something that has really hit me and struck me is just the need for us to be able to focus on our service members, on our civilians, the personnel side of things. It's so easy to feel like our focus is on the tech and the innovation, the hardware side. But I remember hearing from, you know, this one service member at the Joint Base in my district. He said, sometimes it feels like our country cares more about the hardware than the people. And that really stuck with me. It's why I joined on the Military Personnel Subcommittee. It's why I've been so focused on some of these key issues. So, you know, that's something that I know, you know, our colleagues on the Armed Services Committee have been very focused in on. Some of these efforts, as Mikey mentioned, just, you know, the pay increases for our troops, the child care support. But I'll say also is on the mental health side, it's so important. I just did a roundtable in my district, and just hearing from the sheer number of military personnel that are not getting the health, you know, the mental health support that they need. You know, we got to do better on that. And this bill is trying to push and create opportunities for us to be able to increase the number of mental health providers for our troops, to be able to make sure that we have the kind of right resources that we need going forward in that kind of capacity. Now more than ever, this is so critically important. You know, one of the efforts I've been pushing is trying to increase healthcare for our troops. In fact, I have a Healthcare for Our Troops Act. We weren't able to get that full amount in, but we have what's called the Dental Care for Our Troops Act in this, which is now going to give dental care benefits to all people that are wearing our uniform. I don't know if many people know this, but there are a lot of people that wear the uniform of the United States, that serve our country, especially the Guard and the reserves, that don't have health care. And I just think it's absolutely ridiculous that people wear the cloth of the United States and they're not given the care that they need. It's not just about support for them and their families. It's also about readiness, about making sure that we have the troops that we need when we need them. And dental care being actually the number one reason why people can't activate on a moment's notice if they're not able to be able to keep up with that. So these are the types of things that I just want to highlight. I know it's easy to focus in on the big ticket items, you know, the hardware, and see where we're going on that front. But I really hope that we can raise up the stories of our service members, make sure that they know that they're being looked after, make sure that they know that they're our top priority, as it always should be. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to the chairman.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mikey. Thank you, Jason, for your extraordinary leadership as co-chairs of the National Security Task Force and on the Armed Services Committee, and to this country even prior to arriving here in the United States House of Representatives.
Chairman Jeffries, would the House of Representatives or would House leadership be supportive of just taking the $52 billion for chips manufacturing, and passing that as a standalone bill if the conference committee does not reach an agreement?
It's my hope and expectation that the conference committee is going to reach an agreement. We are working hard to find the common ground. Significant progress has been made, and it's my belief that we will have an agreement hopefully before the end of this district work period.
But Leader McConnell called the negotiations stuck yesterday. So what is the alternative?
Leader McConnell often negotiates in public to try to increase leverage, but I believe if you are talking to the individual members of the conference committee on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the Capitol, they believe that progress continues forward.
Jeffries, we've not heard much at all lately about that COVID bill, COVID money that was stalled. Speaking of things that are stalled back in mid-March here, it's now the middle of July. We have a surge going on now. We have 5 members who have been sick in the past couple of days. You were sick a couple of weeks. Is this ever going to get done, or is Congress just kind of writing this off? It doesn't seem like there's any attention right now on COVID, despite what's going on nationally with COVID.
I think the work continues in this area. We'll have a briefing later on this afternoon from Chairwoman DeLauro and the Appropriations Committee on their work, and I expect that this will come up in that conversation.
How much do you regret not getting that through, though, now when they say there might not be the money? And the problem was on your side of the aisle, because they might not have the money now for these shots come September, October.
I believe that we will do what is necessary. I disagree with the point that you've made that the problem is on our side of the aisle.
Numbers blew up that bill, when the speaker was very angry.
In my experience here on Capitol Hill, the problem is always in the Senate.
On inflation, it reached 9.1%. The new report out today, Republicans are saying this is not the time for Democrats to do another $500 billion spending bill. What's your defense of this effort to now do another slimmed down version of the Build Back Better?
Well, we'll see what happens in the Senate in terms of the particulars, and I open it up to any members behind me to comment. But I think, as Mikey Sherrill indicated, and I'll yield to Mikey and Pete, you know, our focus really is to make America as affordable as it can be for American families and everyday Americans. And we've taken legislative step after legislative step to do that, whether that's on gas prices, which, by the way, are coming down, on food prices, whether that's on driving down the high price of life-saving prescription drugs. So it's my hope that whatever comes out of the Senate is focused on lowering costs for everyday Americans, consistent with what we've done in the House.
Thanks, Chairman. I think that when we're looking at that, we're not interested in new spending. We're interested in how we're going to make this deficit neutral. So looking at things like negotiating prescription drug prices, that'll give us some money, as well as, I think, looking at fully funding the IRS, which actually is a net gain, so that we can fully collect the taxes in a fair way for tax cheats. But I'm also concerned, because we have seen those inflation numbers, that we don't raise taxes on anyone in my district. I just, as I mentioned, had an affordability roundtable. We're talking about people now who are looking at not buying red meat, beef, because the prices have gone up so much. And we've passed some great legislation to increase competition with our meat producers so we can drive those prices down. But we have people in my district, firefighters, I just spoke to a firefighter who's not going to go to the shore. He goes to Lavalette every year and he rents a house, and now his overtime, which usually goes to pay for that, is actually paying for his cost of living. So these are real impacts on people in my district, and we're looking at ways to drive those costs down. And we've, like I said, passed some really good legislation, the Gas Price and Foods Act, bringing that down with ensuring that we improve our agricultural supply chains, get fertilizer prices down. So we're looking to address that. But I think what we're concerned about is certainly making sure that as we pass the new reconciliation bill, if we're able to do that, and again, the problem originates in the Senate for us, as we look at that, making sure that it is revenue neutral.
Are you saying no tax increases even for the very wealthy?
I think that right now, certainly I have a district that has very high taxes. Under the Trump's 2017 tax bill, they took away the ability for a state like mine, which funds a lot of infrastructure, Superfund remediation, the best schools in the nation, et cetera. They took away the ability for us to claim those state taxes on our federal tax form. So now we're getting double taxed. If we can remove that, which is which is revenue neutral as well, the way we've written the SALT bill, I think then we could take taxes down for families at the same time as we're getting, making sure we're paying for things that we care very deeply about, like the environment. Thanks.
All I'd add, I appreciate what Mikey is saying. All I'd add too is, shame on Mitch McConnell for standing in the way of making significant progress on the Competes bill by discussing, our efforts to reduce prescription drug costs. We want to reduce costs for everyday Americans. And the fact that he is linking these two does a disservice to everyday Americans who have seen those prices increase that you're talking about. I'd also say, just by background, half of that CPI increase is tied to energy costs, and we know, and the House has taken strong legislation and strong efforts to help reduce those energy costs, and we stand with the Biden administration to continue to do that more. Mr. Chairman.
So President Biden spoke with Mexico's president yesterday, and he spoke a lot about increasing the number of work visas. But other than this, we haven't seen any comprehensive plan from the White House or here in Congress that's able to pass regarding immigration reform or getting illegal immigration under control. I'm wondering if you guys are working on anything to deal with those issues, or your take on his meeting with Mexico's president.
Me yield to Pete.
We appreciate the bilateral relationship and conversations with Mexico, and we appreciate the president of President Biden meeting with the president to talk about those issues. These are important steps. We've seen time and time again. We've seen Democrats and Republicans, come together on some of these issues, right? Whether it's a support for DACA or whether it's support for work visas, these are things that will help. These are things that will help our country. We would welcome, conversations to help address this. Unfortunately, Republicans have often put up obstacles. Their continued efforts in the Appropriations Committee just this year to continue to try to fund an ineffective physical barrier rather than investing in technology to help address this issue. We want a comprehensive solution, but that issue means it has to be comprehensive. We have to meet these issues, whether it's work permits, a fix for DACA, and a path to citizenship. Those are things that we strongly stand for, but reforming our asylum process and making it easier for folks to claim asylum is something that is a thoughtful approach and something that we need to consider as well.
Take one last question over here.
Given the recent Supreme Court rulings on guns, on abortion, you've also got August recess coming up, the elections. Is it safe to say that the Supreme Court ruling on the EPA, there won't be enough time to do anything legislatively on that in this Congress?
Well, I want to yield to Andy and Jason here as we close, but we have a radical, right-wing, extreme Supreme Court majority that is undermining the ability of the Congress to address issues of clear public concern, which include making sure we have clean water, clean air, and can protect the health, safety, and well-being of the American people. At the same time, they are stripping away a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions and want to open the door to allow a nationwide ban and criminalization of reproductive health care, and are opening the door to flooding our streets with more guns at the same time. So we're going to continue to look at every available legislative avenue to address these issues of concern to the American people. The moment demands it, and we're going to act with the fierce urgency of now.
As we all know, we passed the first gun violence prevention legislation in 3 decades, which is going to make a huge difference in places like Colorado and places like my district, where we saw Columbine, the Aurora Theater shooting, STEM High School, Arapahoe High School. That's my community. And we passed a bill that's going to make a big difference. I take very seriously, as a member of the Armed Services Committee and as a combat veteran, our need to keep faith and fidelity with our female service members, and to make sure that we're protecting their right to have health care and reproductive choice. And we're going to be pushing the Department of Defense and the administration to ensure that they do everything possible to do that. And on the climate front, that is why the NDAA is so important. The single largest consumer of fossil fuels in the world is the United States Department of Defense. Also, the U.S. government agency that uses the most renewable energy is also the United States Department of Defense. So they're both a huge consumer of it, but they're also trying to solve the problem, and they're leading in the United States government on making the transition to renewable clean energy. In this bill, this National Defense Authorization Act has transformational elements that will catalyze that transformation, that will help build out electric vehicle grids and mapping, that will help convert the commercial vehicle fleet to electric vehicles. And we'll do a lot of other things to make our bases more resilient and respond to the climate crisis as we see our ship ports flooding, as we see radar installations in the Arctic falling into the permafrost. This bill is necessary, and it's necessary right now.
Just real quick on this, thanks for raising this issue because, it's something that I've been thinking a lot about, obviously a lot of different problems that we've seen with the Supreme Court, but, today's my youngest boy's 5-year birthday. I'm very proud of him, happy for him, but I'm worried about what kind of world he's going to grow up in. And when it comes to climate, the three of us served in different capacities in uniform and me as a civilian. But I spent my whole career working on terrorism issues and conflict war issues. But I can stand here right now and tell you that the greatest threat that we face when it comes to national security is climate. And it's something that's, even harder to address than some of the issues that I worked on. So I hope we can find steps to be able to push back against what the Supreme Court did, but also recognize that there's no single law that any of us can write that's going to solve this problem once and for all. It's going to require lots of different efforts. So yes, the NDAA is a tool and the other things that we're doing are tools. And that's how we'll push back as well. So it's not just about a direct pushback, but what the Supreme Court did when it came to the EPA ruling, the challenges that faces isn't just about the EPA as well. And we're looking at how this type of effort going forward might start to erode other types of government efforts and actions in other departments and agencies too. So there's a lot there. I worked in 4 different federal departments and agencies. So I've seen a lot of how these types of efforts can roll back some of the efforts that we have that are being run by good public servants that are trying to do the right thing here. And I think that kind of feeling that there's something malicious, that there's some type of conniving efforts on behalf of the government to push things, that's sending the wrong message about our public servants. Thank you.
So I wear several hats as a veteran and a mother, but also as a former federal prosecutor. And I can tell you that this extremist partisan court is really overstepping the bounds of its authority. We have a court that has now overturned a 100-year-old piece of gun legislation that is going to impact other constitutional rights. We've already seen that. We have a court that has overturned a Roe decision. I'm 50 years old. It's been the law of the land for my lifetime, and a court whose members pledged to keep that the law of the land and have walked back that promise. And then we have a court, and you ask specifically to your EPA question, if we're going to pass legislation, we passed legislation. The court said the plain language of that statute did not have the statement that we made that the plain language of that statute said. I mean, they're overturning that. They're encroaching on legislative ground. They're an activist, partisan, extremist, results-oriented court that simply is cherry-picking historical moments to make their case in a way that is really, I think, walking back progress in this country. And as the chairman said, is really making it difficult as a legislative body to take care of our constituents in the appropriate way. And it's quite frankly offensive. And I think you'll be hearing more about that. Thank you.